Hello again, everyone, and welcome to this edition of C.A.R.S. Today's topic is going to be how the modern taste for horsepower has resulted in economy cars that have nearly as much, and in some cases even greater horsepower than some of the classic pony cars and muscle cars from previous decades. So I was quite amazed for one of these that I had seen something about over the past months and had kind of forgotten about. So without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look. In this case, it's actually going to be more of a listen because this is going to be more of a podcast style video. So if you want to watch something else on your screen, or perhaps you're driving, listening to something through Android Auto or another competitor, each person has their preference, but yeah, then you can go ahead and do so as I am talking about these details. But I will let you know at the very end of this video, I will be doing a demonstration of this engine that I have built for you and remove the outer components so that you can see what's going on in the inside of the engine. But more about that later. Okay, so whether you're listening on Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, that doesn't really matter. What does matter is, do you want to hear how amazing modern horsepower is? All right, well, I'm going to put that into perspective. So let's look at some specs from some original sporty vehicles. 1953 Corvette. You could get that with a 150 horsepower inline-six engine. 1955, you could get a V8 with 195 horsepower. Moving on to the Mustang, 1964, there was a 105 horsepower inline-six that was available. 1966, you could get a 271 horsepower V8. Moving over to the Camaro, in 1967, the Camaro SS had 295 horsepower, moving up in the world here. That was with a V8. Back to the Mustang, 1966 Mustang GT350, that's the big boy. Well, that provided 306 horsepower with a V8. And then the 1968 Chevy Nova SS, 295 horsepower V8. Now, this is where it gets interesting. You may recall I just mentioned the 1953 Corvette you could get with a 150 horsepower inline-six engine. Moving on to a modern car, let's take for instance the 2022 Kia Rio. That's an inline four-cylinder engine, nothing too fancy, it's not even turbocharged. 120 horsepower. So that is 30 horsepower shy of the 1953 Corvette with an inline-six. In fact, the inline-six version of the 64 Mustang had 15 horsepower less. I'm starting to see a trend here. Okay, well, how about a 2023 Toyota Corolla? That's the one that surprised me. You can no longer get just an entry-level engine with a 2023 Toyota Corolla. 169 horsepower is what a Corolla, a basic run-of-the-mill Corolla has. 169. That's more than a 53 Corvette with the i6 engine, more than a 64 Mustang with the inline-six engine, and just a little bit under the horsepower from this 55 Corvette with the V8. Moving on down, that's nothing compared to the new three-cylinder. Yes, you heard that right, an inline three-cylinder. It is a turbo this time. GR Corolla, little car, 300 horsepower. So that is more than each of those classic sports cars and pony cars that I had mentioned, other than the Mustang GT350 from 1966. With its V8, it had 306 horsepower. So a 6 horsepower difference in a Mustang compared to a little GR Corolla with a 3-cylinder. Yes, how times have changed. Amazing. And then the 2022 Camry, the base 4-cylinder engine, no turbo there, 203 horsepower. So that was more than the V8 Corvette from 55. Let's move into the Honda stable there. So the 2022 Honda Accord with the entry-level turbocharged 4-cylinder, 192 horsepower, almost as many horsepower as the 55 Corvette V8. But if you go with a larger turbocharged 4-cylinder in the Honda Accord, you're getting 252 horsepower. So a little bit less than the 66 Mustang V8. And incidentally, if you get a V6 Camry, you're at like 301 horsepower, non-turbocharged. So almost as much as the Mustang GT350 from 66. But this one is a real clincher here. The Mercedes AMG CLA 45. It's a little 2-cylinder inline 4-cylinder turbocharged engine with 382 horsepower. So we are talking about 76 more horsepower than the V8 in the 66 Mustang GT350. All right. Well, that brings me to today's engine demonstration. This is a simulation of an engine very similar to that one. I didn't purposely match all the specs of the engine, but I did make it a 2-cylinder turbocharged engine. And it has 381 horsepower, so pretty similar. All right, here we go. All right, there you have it. Thank you so much for listening to today's podcast, if you want to call it that. And thank you all for taking a look at my channel, and have a wonderful day.